Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Lou, can you please make a motion to suspend the rules of procedure?
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move to suspend the rules of procedure as the subsection 6.1, 6.2, and 6.4.
I'll second that.
Sound like Emily. All right, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, first thing is a COVID-19 update from City Administrator Scott. Nice Warner. Scott, have
Just a couple things, Mayor, today. Thank you. First announcement would be that the pool will not be opening Memorial Day weekend. There's still some additional work we need to do to meet some guidelines that have been put out for safety purposes. Also, American Pools is still working on screening some staff. So we're looking to open at some point in June, and we'll provide more clarity on that as we get closer to June. We also are going to expand our farmers market to allow the food vendors to have customers inside the farmers market to pick up only. We're working on removing some booths in there that will allow for better social distancing for folks as they wait to pick up their food. However, all non-food vendors will remain in the lot this week, and we will evaluate next week as to whether we want to continue that setup or perhaps pending any governor announcements, move everybody back inside. We'd like to continue using the outside as long as the weather stays nice, which hopefully it will, at least for the time being. The parks seem to operate really well over the weekend. From what I could see, folks were doing the right thing in the parks. Again, we just ask that if you're going to visit a park, you maintain social distancing, 6 feet. And if you can't, try to wear a mask and just be considerate of those around you, especially on the playground equipment. Finally, Mayor, we want to say that we have filed a permit with the State Fire Marshal for the fireworks display on the 4th of July at the fairgrounds. However, State Fire Marshal's office is not releasing permits until they hear further directives from the governor. So when the governor says it's okay to allow for fireworks, we are going to move straight ahead with a fireworks display on the 4th of July. Thanks to all the staff that worked, not only the PCAD staff, Jill Thompson and her group, or not PCAD, but DCED, Jill Thompson and her staff on the CARES Act work that you'll hear more about today, the PCAD staff on their virtual meetings and how well those are going, and also Public Works and Community Affairs on their work at the Market House and making that run as smoothly as it did. That is all for me, Mayor.
okay. Anybody have anything for Scott? All right, we'll move on to the preliminary agenda review. And as usual, please stop me if you have a question. We'll call a meeting to order at 7 p.m. I'll give an invocation. Unless somebody else wants to, they can speak up between now and then. We'll do the pledge of the flag. Hopefully we'll have our 3 guests here with me and for the If I Were Mayor essay contest local winners. We're doing away with the rules of procedure, and the next meeting dates will be June 2nd. As there's no meeting, that's the primary election. The 9th, the 16th are work sessions at 4 p.m. The 23rd is a regular session at 7 p.m. And there's no meeting on June 30th because we're going to all go to the virtual summer conference. Exciting stuff. And then we'll have the COVID-19 update from City Administrator Scott Nice Warner. We'll have appointments to the Bicycle Advisory Committee. We'll have virtual citizen comment emails Well, I guess we'll do it like we did last time. We'll adopt the minutes of April the 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th. Under the consent agenda, Human Resources Department, we have workers' compensation, self-insurance, TPA services from PMA Management Corporation, Blue Belt, Pennsylvania, for $20,000. We have workers' compensation security deposit bond, continuous bond, Safety National Casualty Corporation, St. Louis, Missouri, $38,100. Excess workers' compensation liability insurance, Safety National Casualty Corporation, St. Louis, Missouri, $170,960. Specific stop loss insurance annual premium from Tokyo Marine HCC, Wakefield, Massachusetts, for $251,747. City-sponsored life insurance, Hartford Life and Accident Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut, $47,962. Dental Insurance Administration, UCCI, Hunt Valley, Maryland, for $43,362. And the Administration of Medical Coverage, United Healthcare, Chicago, Illinois, $311,753. Under Department of Information and Technology, hosting and software support agreement from Casia US LLC out of New York, New York, $14,250.77. Under Departments of Parks and Engineering, Miscellaneous Agricultural Structure Mechanical Engineering Services, Newcomer Associates, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, and MSB Architects, Hagerstown, Maryland, and they are on a retainer. Under Utilities, wastewater is Muffin Monster for Pump Station Number 8, JWC Environmental, Santa Ana, California, $17,523.05. Under wastewater, addition of lab to control room and pelletizing facilities, Sinagro WWT Inc., Baltimore, Maryland, $22,646.95. And underwater, lagoon cleaning and maintenance, Sinagro Central LLC, Baltimore, Maryland, $160,000. Under unfinished business, the approval of an ordinance accepting easement for 700 Frederick Street LLC. Under new business, introduction and annexation resolution, TBH annexation, approval of annexation plan, TBH annexation, introduction of an ordinance, easement for public safety training center, introduction of an ordinance, comprehensive rezoning, approval of actuary assumptions for other post-employee benefits and police and fire employees retirement plan, approval of life safety infrastructure grant program guidelines, approval of Maryland Smart Energy Communities fiscal year 2020 grant agreement, and the approval of cooperation and service agreement with Pay by Phone Technologies, Inc. And we'll have the city administrator's comments and then the mayor and council comments, and then we will adjourn. Any questions? All right. So hearing none, we will move on. Next up is actuary assumptions for other post-employee benefits and police and fire employees retirement plan from Don Francis, Director of Human Resources, and Amy Dreisbach, Human Resources Administrator. Have at it. Unmute, unmute, unmute.
That any better? Sorry about that. Good help is hard to find. We're joined here this afternoon by Bill Carbone, who is the consulting actuary for CBIZ Benefits and Insurance Services, to talk a little bit about the actuarial assumptions for the other post-employee benefits. You know it better as OPEB, and the police fire employees retirement plan. Just as real quick background, CBIZ has served as the city's police fire retirement plan actuary since its inception in 1998. They actually preceded me the first time around. PNC meets regularly with the Police Fire Retirement Committee in conjunction with CBIZ to help us manage that plan from a financial and actuarial and investment perspective. So without further, what I'd like to do is just turn this over to Bill, and he's got a quick presentation for you. Bill, it's all yours.
Bill, you got to unmute. Try again, Bill.
All right, how about that? Can you hear me now? Can everybody hear me?
You're good, Bill. We can hear you.
Great, thanks. And can you see the screen as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, thank you. So what I wanted to do today was just go through just the assumptions that we are, just the major assumptions that we're currently using for the OPEB plan, compare that to what we're using for police and fire, and just talk to you regarding some potential changes. So just to show you, this chart just kind of shows you what the major assumptions are that we're using for the OPEB. Just gives you an idea who has some input on these assumptions. What I really wanted to focus on tonight was the investment return assumption, as well as the mortality table assumption that's used for OPEB purposes, but just also show you that there's a series of other assumptions that we use. Turnover being the probability that somebody will terminate employment from one year to the next. When we anticipate that people will retire at various ages. How many people, what percentage of people do we think will utilize the OPEB plan? And what's the trend rates? What do we see happening with the premiums? Right now, you're using a 7.5% investment return assumption for OPEB purposes for police and fire plan. We adjusted that to 7.25%. I'll talk about that in a moment. For mortality, we're using a table from 2000. The police and fire moved to a recently issued table from the Society of Actuaries. I'll talk about that in a moment as well. And then we just use some standard tables for the assumption of when we think people will terminate employment. We've developed some retirement rates over time. We've developed some the percentage utilization over time, and we've relied on studies from the Society of Actuaries as to what's going to happen with premiums on a go-forward basis. So what I wanted to do was start by talking about the investment return assumption. As I mentioned, currently you're using a 7.5%. I believe your asset allocation is 60% equities, 40% fixed income. And if we just use some rates over the last 15 years, we've seen just large cap equities grow at about 9% a year. We've seen fixed income grow at a little over 4% a year. And if we get a blended rate based on that 60-40 mix and those historical returns, we'd expect your investment return to be about 7%. Because you've got professional management, we expect that to be a little higher, and we'd suggest that a 7.25% rate be used for OPEB, just like we're using for police and fire. And that's just kind of our analysis of what would get you there. Any questions regarding that? Okay. And then we also looked at the mortality assumption, and we have not changed the mortality assumption for some time because we've been anticipating a new table from the Society of Actuaries. And actually, at the beginning of last year, the Society of Actuaries issued a mortality table developed specifically for public sector plans. And what they did is they actually developed a table with three different tables: a table for teachers, a table for public safety, and a table for general employees. And actually, the teachers table indicated that teachers are living longer than was previously expected. And what we did for the police and fire plan is we used a public safety table. And what we would propose doing for the OPEB plan is to use a table with 50% based on the public safety table and the other 50% based on the general employees table. And we'd recommend a transition to what we call the Pub 10 tables, which is these newly issued public employee plan tables. And in a moment, I'll show you the financial impact of making these two changes. But I also just wanted to mention that we always suggest every 5 years or so to do a study to review all the other assumptions. We want to make sure to get, to develop liabilities and costs that are anticipate the actual experience of the plan. You should every 5 years or so compare the assumptions to what's actually been experienced by the plan. So beyond tonight's discussion, I just wanted to introduce the idea of doing what we call an experience study. We looked at the last 5 years or so and see what has been the actual experience of the plan and compare it to what the current assumptions are to see if it's if some revisions are suggested. There's multiple reasons for doing it. We want to have as accurate results as possible. In case auditors question where these assumptions come from, you would have documentable support. And then also for our own professional standards on the actuarial side. So that would be something that we would suggest that would be considered as well as for an experience study for both the police and fire plan as well as the OPEB plan. And just to give you an idea of the financial impact of making these changes, right now, as of the last GASB report that we did for the OPEB plan, based on current assumptions, the liability was $37.8 million. If all we did was change the investment return, that would increase the liabilities by about 2 to 2.5% and would increase liabilities by about $800,000. A change in mortality table, just that change alone is actually a fairly insignificant change. It only impacts liabilities by about $37,000. And if you were to make both changes together, it would increase liabilities by about $900,000. And if we look at what the impact would be on the present value of the current year accruals, you would see some similar results in that you would have about a $20,000 impact for changing the investment return. You would see actually a modest decrease in the value of current year accrual for changing the mortality table. And the overall increase in the current year accruals would be about $16,000 by making both a change in mortality and a change in the investment return assumption. And you would see the overall impact on the funded percentage of the plan would go from almost 30% down to about 29.3% if you were to make these changes. And just for informational purposes, we just show that basically you'd almost be bringing the funded percentage back to where it was as of June 30, 2018, if you were to make these changes. And even taking out of play what's happened over the last few months in the markets, it's just a challenge to have returns in excess of 7%, just because of there just aren't many opportunities in the fixed income side of things. So we are seeing just a general trend of people, adjusting their investment return assumption, and even at that, 7.25 would be on the higher side. And we are also, because there's now a mortality table that's been developed for governmental plans, that we've now seen that there's been a transition to using this new mortality table as well. Any questions?
So Bill, this is Austin Heffernan. I think I agree the 7.25% in this market is pretty aggressive for a non-aggressive type of a pension plan type of investment.
Sure.
What happens if we don't, in layman's terms, if we don't fund this completely? The reason I'm asking this is we keep reading daily in the news about unfunded pension liabilities in municipalities all over the country, and cities that are in dire straits and unable to afford the pension liability that they've incurred. And at what point do we run into problems like that?
And right now, you're not at a point. Well, first of all, I'll address the OPEB number one. A lot of governmental OPEB plans are totally unfunded, and it's just pay as you go. So even though seeing a funded percentage of 30% or almost 30%, that actually puts you way ahead of most entities when it comes to the OPEB. And the fact that you're putting in your funding policy indicates that you're going to put in, you pay the current year's premiums plus $650,000. I think you're probably being as responsible as most plans that we see. My bigger concern is on the police and fire, where the funded percentage is under 50%, and you typically see a higher percentage on the pension side. And that's just an area. You're not in a position, though, where you're anywhere near having, where you don't have the cash or the assets to pay for current benefits or for the next 10 years. I mean, the issues are further out if you're not, if you don't make changes to look at the experience of the plan and have that tie back to what your assumptions are. And so that's where I'm a little more concerned. But even there, you've been more aggressive in your funding on the pension side as well.
So on the funding issue, would that entail an increase in the employee contribution or city contribution, or both?
The source from our end doesn't matter. Ultimately, it's going to be the city's responsibility, and that would be a city decision as to how you want to share that responsibility. I mean, you've just increased the employee side a couple of years ago. So at this point, that would be a decision that the city would have to see whether that's something that could be negotiated or not, as far as increasing the employee percentage.
So if we need to include this in our budget calculations, are we looking 10 years out, or is that something we need to be looking at this coming fiscal year and the next fiscal year increasing?
The bigger issues are 10 years out, and we can do some liability. We can do some cost projections for you inside the police and fire plan, where you can see it out. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this year or next year is not the issue. It's just you when you're under 50% funded. That's why we indicated on the pension side that you put in a contribution that was in excess of what the actuarially determined contribution amount was, only because you want to try to improve that funded percentage.
And this is Michelle, and if I could just interject just for a moment, not to be confused, the majority of the presentation was regarding OPEB, and of course, we're kind of talking about both OPEB and police and fire. And one thing that I would just like to add to what Bill has already stated on the OPEB side, Austin, is that we have heard from our bond rating agencies in the past that if our percentage increases are not reflected on both sides, both OPEB and police and fire, it could at some point jeopardize or risk our bond rating if other things also occur. So keeping in mind, one of the things to look at is, total liabilities, and it includes OPEB, police and fire. They look at fund balance reserve. They look at willingness and ability to increase revenue sources, a whole multitude of things. And as Bill stated, typically the city does 100% for OPEB, 100% of all the expenses plus $650,000. In the fiscal year 21 proposed budget, I had included payment of all claims and an additional $700,000 for a contribution to OPEB. And I am still working on a plan on how to make that still happen and come back in a few weeks, hopefully, with a presentation to council. Trying to keep everything strong. And then as for, as Bill mentioned, CBIS gives us the total percentage that we need to fund for police and fire pension. The city had stated one of the things that I believe it was Council Member Alshire had asked several years ago was, where was our threshold as an employer? What was the maximum amount that we could do? And we got to about 14%. And at 14%, the dollar threshold started being too much for us to easily balance the budget. And that's when we came back and asked our employees to go to a 7% match, if you would, a 7% contribution. So before we would look at changing the employee side, we would, one, commit still to retaining the employer at the 14%, and we would have to ask them enough in advance. We certainly wouldn't do it now and look to implement it in July, because that's not a very long turnaround for them to plan on their budget.
No, but
Thank
I
you.
think what would be helpful is when we do the July valuation work is to do some projections for you, so you can see where as we get into the future, what the liabilities start looking like, especially the unfunded liabilities.
This is Kristen. I think my point has been repetitively that it doesn't appear that we've established ceilings. And it appears we are in this cyclical nature whereby we put a number in that projects the market in an aggressive fashion. It doesn't occur to the degree that is projected. And then we make up the difference, so to speak, and then start over again with a projection that we don't meet. And at the same time, not only do we have to make up the difference, but we have to keep on pace with the projected schedule to create, 100% fund solvency, and trying to sort of do both of those at the same time, year after year after year. It doesn't seem that the number on the employer side will ever slow down, or at least not, until you reach that 100% threshold.
Well, it'll never, and you're right, Kristen, it never will. But we are definitely in a better place than, let's just say, our counterparts down in Annapolis when it comes to OPEB benefits. But anybody have anything else for Bill or for Don? Okay. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Don.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Next up is a review of upcoming annexation in May 2020. We have Megan and Kathy Marr.
Hello. So we are introducing annexation next week. So we are just going to review that annexation really quickly. The mayor and city council have prioritized the review of existing pre-annexation agreements and also exploring new possibilities for annexation opportunities. So the planning commission is recommending the following annexation to be introduced on May 26th. It's case number A2020-05. It's the annexation of Thomas Bennett Hunter, which is 11661 Hopewell Road, tax map 48, block 11, parcels 572 and 865. And then it also includes a portion of Halfway Boulevard roadbed and the CSX right-of-way. So this is the city initiating the pre-annexation agreement, case number WS 2015-07. The area is 19.37 acres. County zoning is IG, which is industrial general, and the proposed city zoning would also be IG. It's within the medium range growth boundary area, the urban growth area, and the state's designated priority funding area. It's currently an undeveloped property, so it's not served by water or wastewater. It would be served by city water and county wastewater upon annexation. And then there would be no change in ownership or service of Halfway Boulevard or Hopewell Road, and then city will provide police and fire. And following introduction of the annexation on May 26th, the public hearing will be scheduled. At a meeting following the public hearing, mayor and city council will vote on approval of the resolution, and then the annexation becomes effective 45 days following approval. So I did provide the zoning exhibit for the packets and also the annexation plan, the draft of that as well. If anyone has any questions.
Anybody have it for Megan? Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, but you're still up, so remain seated.
Yeah, so we're just gonna review.
Public input, go ahead.
We're gonna review the public input that we received at the public hearing. That we had an additional public hearing for Trey Alter's vacant tract on Security and for Pangbourne Park townhomes. Both were proposed to be rezoned from R-Mod, which is moderate density residential, to R-Med, which is medium density residential. So the public input we've received on those properties are a letter from Jackie Burkett of 722 Security Road, who is opposed to the rezoning of the Security Road tract from R-Mod to R-Med. She states in her letter dated April 23rd that multifamily housing units will diminish the value of hers and other single-family homes in the neighborhood. She also states that the vacant tract has always been used as farmland since her family has lived here, and she has lived her entire life on this street. Jackie urges mayor and council in her letter to consider longtime residents before making a change like this. And then we also have a letter from Curtis Keltner of 721 Park Road, who is also opposed to the rezoning of the Security Road tract from R-Mod to R-Med. He talks about rental properties causing problems and disrupting the neighborhood. And then he also talks about parking near the rental property at 724 Medway, and also says there are enough townhome developments already. And then we also spoke to Dave Williams, who's also opposed to the rezoning of that Security Road tract from R-Mod to R-Med, again, opposed to higher density housing in the area. So I did provide both letters for mayor and council. I'm not sure if anyone wanted to discuss those or not.
I was just curious, Megan, that tract runs from Security Road all the way back to the boundary of Pangbourne Park.
Yes.
Isn't that really low in there? Is that buildable?
I think there were some floodplain issues on the site and a lot of other development constraints that I think we spoke about when that request initially came forward.
I'm just curious about how much of that can be developed into RMED type of housing.
Well, that's the reasoning behind going from RMOD to RMED is to make it more affordable for when you build something, you need to get a return. And they've had this property, and yes, there are flooding issues definitely behind the meat market there in other areas. But going from RMED or RMOD to RMED allows to be able to recover some of those costs as opposed to being RMOD.
And RMED
I
allows
can-
homes where RMOD does not as well.
Mhm. Okay.
What did you just say, Megan? You got cut off.
That RMOD does not allow townhomes, but RMED does allow townhomes.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Megan?
Not really. I could see that the cost of doing anything with that property with a moderate density building plan probably just wouldn't be doable. As you said, Mayor, I think you need the additional footprint to be able to do anything there.
Yeah, we do actually need a decision on whether these two additional properties should be included in the entire comp rezoning package.
And just to clarify, so that allows for townhomes, but not apartments, correct?
Correct. And the idea was that that area is surrounded by townhome development, so Planning Commission saw it as comparable zoning for the area.
And I can understand people on Security Road, especially because, growing up in that end of town, I played in them fields a lot as a kid. So it has always been, farming land. But that doesn't, that the property owner has a right to ask, and then we have to make a decision whether we want to allow that in the rezoning or not. So, having said that, I need to get a shake of the head that yes, we're going to allow it in the rezoning.
This is Kristen. Can you reiterate why this wasn't, if I'm correct, this wasn't included in the Planning Commission's recommendations?
So in the comp plan, the future land use designation is medium density residential, which means that both RMOD and RMED are acceptable zoning districts for that future land use designation. So it wasn't included in the initial proposed rezoning, but Planning Commission felt after hearing the request that it maybe should have been.
Right. It was requested by the landowner.
Correct. We received that as part of our public input for the first hearing on the comp rezoning.
I'm okay, Mayor.
Yeah, I'm okay, Mayor.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Just for clarity, this Kristen, so you have at least 3 folks that indicated we're moving forward, correct?
Yes, I have 4. Correct.
Okay.
Michelle, you're up for the fiscal year
Good
21
evening.
budget review.
So this is Michelle. I'm back once more with a brief and not final, but last update on fiscal year 21 budget before we have our public hearing a little bit later this evening. First, of course, we did hear from Bill, from CBIZ, our actuarial consultant, and just kind of to reiterate, one of the things that moving forward, if the markets doesn't rebound a little bit and get a little bit better, it's definitely too far, being that we're in mid-May, to make any changes, not just to our police and fire pension and contributions, but also for the state of Maryland to make any changes now, hopefully, for what they want and expect from us, both as an employee, both from employees and from an employer perspective beginning this July. But if things do not improve, I imagine that our percent of contributions that we will have to make from an employer standpoint to police and fire, state of Maryland for the fiscal year 22 cycle will probably be much higher than the 10.3% than what they're asking for fiscal year 21. So one of the final topics I just wanted to kind of cover, and it's one of the topics, and I know always seems to be a topic that we talk about very frequently and for a significant portion of our time, but I did want to come back for fiscal year 21 and talk about general fund agency contributions as well as events. So in the packet and in the memo, I included charts that, again, I took straight from our budget book. So in the fiscal year 21 budget book, in section 2 on page 2 at the very, very bottom, there's a chart that lists all of our planned and proposed general fund agency contributions. And in that chart on the far right-hand column, you will see fiscal year 21 total of $284,600. In those grand total of this contribution, that is giving money to the Art Museum, Community Rescue Service, Discovery Station, Hagerstown Municipal Band, Hagerstown Neighborhood Development Partnership, Maryland Symphony Orchestra, the Maryland Theater, Washington County Free Library, and the Washington County Historical Society. And of the $284,600, I did just wanted to take a quick minute to stop and discuss one more time the items in that amount that are already committed that we had made pledges or obligations to pay. So first is there's an extra $10,000 included for the Art Museum, the Washington County Arts Museum. And fiscal year 21 would be the final year for that. So the contribution that we typically make to the Art Museum is $40,500, and for proposed fiscal year 21, it'd be $50,500. The next one down is the Discovery Station. We had committed to 3 years of $2,500 for a total of $7,500. That was for an interactive display. In fiscal year 21, that $2,500 is the final and last payment of that commitment. Then further down, Hagerstown Neighborhood Development Partnership. So we had originally, maybe not a little over a year ago, had been approached when the city owned the building and sold it into private. We had been asked if we could contribute about $500 a month or $6,000 for a year that would help cover either rent expense or utility costs. And that ended in fiscal year 20. So in the proposed budget, you see $28,450 there. That is the normal contribution and does not include any additional monies. Now, I do know, and I'm aware that they came in and asked for, excuse me, a continuation or a little bit more time from the city to help cover that. But I was not, when I originally did the fiscal year 21 budget, able to do that without taking from somewhere else. Last but not least, the Maryland Theater, $109,000. $9,000 of that is our normal annual contribution. The other $100,000 would be the second year of a total $300,000 additional pledge that we did for its expansion. Is there any questions or concerns? I guess if we wanted to talk about them, now would be the time, because typically we send out memos to these agencies. We would do it after we approve the budget, and I don't want to send to like the Washington County Free Library and let them know they have $30,500 coming. If for some reason agency contributions would be one of those things that we would look to reduce if our revenue reduces.
Well, I mean, I understand, and, you know, I had a guy ask me the other day about the budget, and I said, listen, this is a budget that, it's gonna be extremely fluid, for a while, because we don't know personally, when you mentioned the Washington County Free Library, do we know, did they apply for PPP? Did they get any help that may have offset, it may be able to offset our contribution, since they have not been open and they have not been deemed essential. So I don't think that, you know, we have a running knowledge of what this budget is going to look like when it's all said and done, and which is why it makes it so fluid and it makes it so difficult. And Emily, I know that you sit on the HNDP board. Have you heard anything else about any help from the county or anybody to help assist with that?
They got 3,000. So they got half of what they need to supplement their rent this year. So they have asked us for the other portion of that. But they did apply and that's what they got out of their grant from the county. So I can forward everyone the email.
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be helpful. And I truly believe that we need to go down this list and find out who, you know, who received some, you know, some CARES money or whatever, that may help to offset our contribution where they may not need as much from us this year.
Yeah, I'd be especially interested in, did they apply for and receive any of the idle grants, which don't have to be paid back, that could supplement?
So maybe what we do, instead of going through the list, I wasn't looking to put anyone area on the spot tonight, but I kind of needed a feel for if we were going to say, if we were ready that all of the agency contributions as originally proposed needed to be continued and funded, and that was an area that I should not touch. But if we're going to come back and have this conversation, what we can do is send out a memo and say, you know, our budget is fluid, we're continuing conversations. And one of the things, if we're interested, that I would have to come back and ask them, because I do not know if any of them applied for any of this other federal grants. We could always ask for follow-up information. Some of these places have not been open. We have continued to make our fiscal year 20 contribution at the normal rate and sent the last quarter check, even though, as I said, many were not necessarily open or have public hours. But if everybody is of the opinion that this 284,000 is an area that we would want to discuss in greater details and make it be a whole nother meeting, I can ask and reach out to all of these areas to see if they have applied for other monies yet. Is that something you wish me to do?
I think that'll be important for us to make a decision going forward.
Yeah, I agree.
Michelle, this is Kristen. I'm just gonna. I mean, for me, it's real simple. The information I've been receiving from the state is for there to be an expectation of an up to 15% decline in some of the state shared revenues. I look at that 284 and say, you know, without, and again, I agree, not putting anybody on the spot, but to me, that's where I'm at with the number. Is you know, we're going to expect a decrease in some of our funding, and if we're using an estimate from the state of somewhere around the 15% range, then, you know, we can have a conversation later about, you know, who gets what, but the total for me is 15% less than what we had last year.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's important too to see an overall budget for that particular organization. So for example, we saw the Hagerstown Municipal Band budget. We are pretty much it. Whereas the contribution that we give, I'm just gonna pick one, the art museum, may be nothing. I mean, our contribution may not affect them really at all, whereas if we pulled it from another organization, it would have a detrimental impact. So I think that that information is important.
Also, I think we need to make sure, I look at things, if I'm correct, I saw the Maryland Theater, I think Miss Maryland is canceled this year. And we have a $9,000 contribution in our budget for Miss Maryland. Just think that people may not be using that they would have used in prior years.
And actually, Miss Marilyn is one of the topics of conversation on the other. As soon as we finish this, it's going to touch real brief on events. Miss Marilyn is, and Jill has joined us as well, and I don't want to put her on the spot, but Miss Marilyn is an actual event, unlike all of our other events where we have a signed contract and an obligation that the city committed to do. And so one of the things, Councilmember, you are correct in that the Miss Maryland pageant has been canceled. It had originally been deferred, I think, until August or September, but is now being totally canceled. But because of the contract and working with Jill and Scott and also Jessica at the Maryland Theater, the city is going to do half of that amount. So about, I think, $4,000. I think it was an $8,000 deposit that we had in our agreement. So the city agreed to do $4,000, even though our agreement states that we would pay the whole amount. So I'll ask for more information from all these agencies, and then we'll come back and plan another meeting. And I will make sure that if I do not already have their budget information, I'll probably ask for even updated, because I'm sure not only is our budget changing, but these other organizations as well, just because so much is up in the air right now.
If I could just ask the question, if contractually we're obligated to pay $9,000, but we decided to only pay $4,000, why don't we just pay zero? I mean, if we're going to be in breach of contract, let's breach the contract.
Well, actually, the contract is for $8,000. $8,000 is the deposit for the Maryland Theater. The other $1,000 was typically for, I think, a luncheon that is done. So only $8,000 was stipulated in the contract, and we could certainly breach the contract if that's the direction that this body wishes to give.
I'm just saying, with the incredible hardship that everybody and all of these agencies on the other page are under, and I mean, and the limit that we have and the uncertainty that we're facing, I don't know. I think we need to save wherever we can save, and if we have a little bit of reserve and we find out that the library didn't get anything, they didn't get any grants, or one of the other agencies didn't get anything, maybe we could shift some funds around someplace, because everybody's hurting.
I agree,
And
Austin. I mean, I look at the municipal band, and I know that, several of their concerts are being canceled or postponed, and, who knows if they've even applied for, the EIDL grants. So I'm just very curious to know where we can shift and move and give to those that might need it a little bit more.
Well, I'm pretty sure the municipal band falls under the governor's probably phase 3 reopening, which is currently somewhere in the fall, if he doesn't, if he doesn't decide to alter that and do it on a regional basis, as what's been asked. But I don't know. I mean, I understand that we've got a contract with the Maryland Theater, but if an event isn't going to happen at all, I have a hard time justifying paying for something that isn't going to happen. It's kind of like the Suns, paying a lease on a property that they can't use. I mean, it's basically, we're doing the same thing. So yeah, I think we need to have that and we'll wait for Jill, but I think that has to be a conversation we need to have with the Maryland Theater.
The contract included language that if the event were canceled, payment would still be expected.
So in the contract, it says if a catastrophic virus hits the world and we, nothing's open, that we're still paying. I got
Is it inappropriate
Time's up.
to ask? Is it inappropriate for me to ask who negotiated that contract?
It's exactly what I was gonna say. Whoever negotiates these contracts, we need to hire them.
Let's move on. We'll come back to that later, please.
It was no one on this meeting, I can tell you that.
Okay, so last but not least, I have included an overall, and again, this chart is found in the fiscal year budget book in section 2, and it's on page 58. It's the whole page itself, and it's a listing of all of the different events and functions throughout the city. And I think specifically there, I didn't want to necessarily have conversations about all these individual events, but more a general conversation that there are several on here for fiscal year 20 that, because of the timing, of course, does not happen until, mid-March until June 30. And some of those events may or may not happen. So fiscal year 20 is more than likely going to be slightly under budget. But then when we look at the proposed budget for fiscal year 21, it's possible that if some of these events get deferred and not canceled, that some of them could occur twice within our same fiscal year. Kind of on what I've left Jill with is that for the most part in our fiscal year 21 budget, so we do have two different categories. The first, you'll see a subtotal that says public function events, and that's the area that falls under community and economic development in with Jill's group. And then the last handful say recreation events, just as a reminder that we do have some things that are still an event that we do through our Parks and Recreation division. So, we've asked Jill at this point, because I know she's already being asked, and I guess I've left it with her that fiscal year 21 proposed budget, they can ask to have it funded if they have it more than once, but that does not guarantee that we're going to have funding available to cover it. In other words, it could be an event that we sponsor forever. And if it happens 2 times in fiscal year 21, if we only have enough funding and money to go around, we might only be able to sponsor it 1 time in that fiscal year. And again, so as a reminder, public function events at $210,250. Of course, one of the largest one is our very own Imagine Hagerstown events, which have been pushed back out of the month of May. So the majority of those that we had thought was going to occur in fiscal year 21 is more than likely going to happen in fiscal year 21 instead of 20. The majority of the events under recreation, which include Christmas in the Park, City Park Festival, Harvest Hoedown, 4th of July fireworks, fishing tournament, and music by the lake, the majority of all of those events have already occurred prior to the middle of March. So all of that money has been expended. I think 1 or 2 of them came in a little bit under budget. But overall, total for all events for fiscal year 21 proposed budgets at $290,000. And these types of events that cost in excess of any revenue or sponsorships that the city would receive can and are eligible use for hotel motel tax revenue proceeds. Any questions on the just overall events? Thank you.
All right, Jill, we're going to talk about the proposed COVID-19 Small Business Emergency Relief Grant Fund.
Thank you, and good evening. In response to, can you hear me okay? In response to the COVID-19 crisis, we are presenting a recommended Small Business Emergency Relief Grant Program that would be funded by CARES Act funding coming into Washington County, a portion of which can be used for non-public health response activities. So there is a total of 26 million, just over 26 million coming into Washington County from the Federal CARES Act. Approximately 13 of that needs to be used for public health expenditures, leaving 13.2 million for non-public health activities. And approximately 8.9 million of that 13.2 is being proposed to be used for a business stabilization grant program. And it's envisioned that the city Department of Community and Economic Development would work in partnership with the county Department of Business Development to administer a grant program utilizing the experience of our department that we have in administering grant programs and the mechanisms that we have in place to deliver funding quickly to businesses. So a couple of key components in your packet, I'll summarize the grant program, is proposed to be a direct grant to businesses based on demonstrated injury from the crisis and also demonstrated financial need. Set up as a grant up to $10,000, not to exceed 3 months of operating expenses for businesses with 50 or fewer employees, and those established and operating 6 months prior to the crisis, a date of September 1, 2019, and those that were in good standing prior to January 1st of 2020, recognizing that some businesses through the crisis may have fallen out of good standing. And looking for businesses to pledge to retain and rehire employees and continue operations for at least the next 12 months. And a program to work in conjunction with other federal relief programs. So encouraging businesses to look at the Paycheck Protection Program, other long-term bank financing or SBA financing for their long-term needs. So having this work in conjunction with those other programs. We're looking to structure the program with the ability to use the grant funds very broadly for operating expenses, which could include payroll, rent, mortgage, utilities, insurance, and a range of unbudgeted expenses for COVID-19 supplies and equipment, which may be business masks for employees, personal protection equipment, plexiglass shield, sanitizer, those types of things. Since providing you the packet, the city attorney is recommending some language change to the last sentence prior to the signature on the application, that this be related to the confidential commercial information and the confidential financial information submitted by the applicant. City attorney is suggesting revising this language to acknowledge that the applicant is entitled to protection under the Maryland Public Information Act, and the city and county shall produce the application and any of the attachments to third parties only in accordance with that act and cases construing the same. So we'll make those edits at the recommendation of the city attorney in finalizing the document. So in general, we've designed the program to be simple and as flexible as possible. It is modeled after the Maryland Small Business COVID-19 Emergency Relief Grant Fund that was administered by the Maryland Department of Commerce. And also staff reviewed a number of programs offered nationally by other jurisdictions as we came up with this recommendation. And the Maryland Commerce Program is now unfunded and not expected to be refunded, but we did find it to be a successful model as we put this recommendation together. The city and the county are working in partnership with the business community. I spoke at our last week's meeting on the recovery support function of the EOC, and our business recovery team provided feedback on this proposed program. And today's request, just to clarify, that we're not announcing or opening an application process tonight to the business community for this emergency relief grant program. We're seeking approval of the mayor and city council on this concept and the level of detail that we are presenting, and asking for approval to allow the city administrator and the city attorney to make any necessary edits in order to finalize the document. This will allow us to quickly implement the program when we have received the approval of the CARES Act funding, and we also receive the county approval and any further guidance or requirements that come connected to that funding. I believe Susan Small from Washington County Department of Business Development was going to join us. I'm not sure if she is on the phone as well. I'm happy to take any questions on the proposed program or the process going forward.
Hey, Jill, this is Austin. Quick question. I think, number one, I think this is great. And definitely our businesses could use this and any other help we can get for them. Just wanted to make sure that we avoid some of the mistakes that were made in some of the other programs that were implemented, like PPL. Is the limitation, looking at the businesses that were the hardest hit downtown, 50 employees and 5 million in sales, is that targeting too big of a market? Because the ones that seem to me are the really hard hit are the smaller restaurants, the smaller retail establishments, smaller businesses, and I'm thinking about how when the PPL first opened up, how Ruth's Chris got all the money, and the small mom and pop restaurants were left trying to figure out what happened to them. Are we targeting too big of a business with that kind of a limitation?
I do hear what you're saying. I think we are seeing the 50 employee number and the 5 million in other jurisdictions. So we're using that somewhat as a guideline. So that would eliminate some of the largest employers in Washington County and the city of Hagerstown. And the 5 million would also eliminate those that are connected to large corporate entities that are an arm of a larger national corporate entity. We can certainly take a look at it from the feedback. I think we're on target given the potential size of the funding pool and using that as a guide to prioritize the money. But I do appreciate the question, and we can certainly test that question a little further.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that here's the other problem I have, and just having been through this myself with a small business, the amount of time that it takes a small business owner to go through the approval process and the application process and everything else. And again, this form looks very good. It's very succinct. It's not like some of the other ones that we've experienced, but the amount of resources in this environment where you've got half of your staff is gone, or 3/4 of your staff is gone, and the proprietor and the proprietor's family are trying to just keep the lights on and keep business going. The overhead that comes back to trying to deal with all of the reporting and everything else that goes on this, and keep up with these applications is a little bit more than some small businesses can handle. And this looks very good. I think this is very succinct, but I'm just concerned about that, because so many of our businesses missed out on anything because they were hit at a time when they just didn't have the resources and the staff available that they normally would have to do clerical things like this. So that was my part of my question for, are are we going after or opening it up to too big of an audience with a 50 employee, 5 million sales? The only other thing I have, if you look over on item number 18 on the application form, if you're there, it should say please indicate, not indicated, just spelling. And then the other thing is, I think the question on there on have you applied or received in the amount should also add, we've got the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL, the loan, but should also include the EIDL grant. And the grant was everyone who applied for the EIDL loan could also apply for the grant. A lot of people didn't get the loan, but a lot of people got the grant. And if you get the grant, you don't have to get the loan. It's not an either. It's you know, you. So the $10,000 grant doesn't have to be repaid. So that should be something we know too. If they did apply and did get that, that may put them into a less needy category, let's say.
And
Great,
and
thank you.
I'm sorry. In follow up to that with the EIDL stuff, it just appeared in my account. You know, there was no indication as to what it was or that I received it. It just all of a sudden got there, which was nice, but there was no kind of rules to it. You know, I had to ask other people what to do with it. So I just want to make sure that communication is paramount, because business owners, you know, the indication as to when they are going to get awarded and when it will be funded is really important, because, you know, we were all kind of clueless. I do have a question though, two of them actually. How long are businesses going to have to apply? Like, what is the time frame in order to apply for this?
I think what we've seen with other programs is that applications come in volume and rather quickly. So we didn't put a deadline for application, but applications would be processed on a first come, first served basis, so long as funding was available. So once we are in a position to announce the program, applications can start coming in, but keeping it open-ended so long as funding is available. And there are some reference to that in the documents.
And we're prepared for that massive amount, that massive influx of applications, and with a system that is not bogged down and people are sitting and the computer's running and not getting applied, and because that's a thing. So I just want to make sure that there's enough bandwidth or whatever has to happen in order to faxing. If we can fax, go back to the old days. Something.
We're committed to doing it well. Scott and I have also talked about using staff resources beyond the Department of Community and Economic Development, making this an all hands on deck to make sure that we're processing this efficiently and serving the most critical need, which is getting the money in the hands of the businesses.
Thank you, Joe.
Do we have a formula yet? And I know Susan is on the on here. Do we have a formula yet that would assign an amount of money to the city of Hagerstown to use the program?
I'll let Susan take that question.
Sorry, I think you're echoing there a little bit, Mayor. Do we have a formula in terms of figuring out sort of the who gets what, or are you talking about administering the applications? I'm sorry.
I'm talking about, you know, I've seen some information that says the city of Hagerstown, out of this 13 point whatever million dollars, could see probably about 4 million plus to be able to apply to this program for city businesses. Is that true?
I don't know that has been formalized, to be quite honest. We have a scheduled meeting, I believe it's tomorrow, Jill, you can correct me if I'm wrong, with our staff, they're actually the mirrored staff. So we're gonna have our CFO, Sarah Greaves, as well as your director of budget and finance. And we're going to kind of go over these questions because we don't have that formula filled out yet. No. I would imagine, and Jill and I have talked about how that works. I would think it would be according to, the sort of like how we do all the other incentives, according to census data. So, the city is obviously our county seat. So the county would handle all the other municipalities. The city would then get a proportional amount, just like we've done with some of the other things similar where we're splitting funds or splitting the cost of things. So
hopefully it's not like the hotel motel tax money.
what's that? Oh, the split there, you mean? Yeah, well,
I'm being just stop, Susan. I'm just being facetious.
sorry, it's been a long couple months. But yeah, I think there's a proportional, because Jill's gonna have her set of businesses within the city. And so figuring all those details out, we need to do, and that's why we're meeting with our budget and finance directors tomorrow. And then I think we even have potentially our information systems or IT, because we've been researching some portals and programs to be able to handle the amount, which I think is what Shelley was alluding to, the massive amount of applications that could come in, and how are we going to handle them both on the front end of the businesses and the back end to our staff.
Do we know when this CARES money?
No, we don't yet.
Is there any opportunity? Is there any opportunity in anybody's budget, including ours, that would allow us to enact this program and get reimbursed through the CARES funding?
I'm not sure there's an appetite to do that with the commissioners. It didn't come up today in my presentation. I'm certainly happy to discuss that with them.
So there's no kind of time frame whatsoever that we're aware of when these funds will become available if we don't implement something and then get reimbursed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't believe that there is right now. We, through the communications that I have with our EOC and Department of Emergency Services staff every day, multiple times a day, I ask what the latest is. And I even up to like an hour ago, we don't have any information yet. It would be nice if we knew, and I imagine it will be doing, other counties are doing, they're sort of sitting in the same seat we are right now.
Okay.
And just to reiterate that we are looking for approval during the special session this evening, and with that ability for the city administrator and the city attorney to help us get to final documents after your approval. That allows us really to respond as quickly as possible when the approvals come forward.
Jill, I just have one other quick comment or question. In the acknowledgement and certification, it says that we have willing intentions to continue operating our business for at least the next 12 months. As we all know, there is no vaccine yet. There is a suggestion that there may be a second wave of this. Is there going to be anything, and if not, can we plan for it, that if there's another, I guess, closing or, shut in or whatever, that these businesses, we have a clause that indicates that just because the next 12 months, they may not have to be open for 12 months in case something happens.
That can certainly be added. Certainly can be added. That is a good suggestion.
All right, are we, any more questions? Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank
Hey,
you, Susan.
Susan, please keep me in the loop on any kind of time frame you hear from anybody, please.
I sure will. Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep, have a nice evening, everyone.
You too. All right, so next up is the old city administrator's comments.
Just two things, Mayor. You were forwarded, Mayor and Council were forwarded two requests for letters of support. The first you received was from Ms. Tina Capetta, Superintendent of C&O National Historic Park, requesting support for C&O National Canal Historical Park Phase 4 towpath rehabilitation. Safe towpath project being submitted for consideration for a grant through the Maryland Transportation Alternatives Program in 2020. I did hear from Councilman Heffernan of his support. Councilman Alshire also provided an email with some concerns I believe everybody saw. Just looking for head nods, or in Councilman Alshire's case, up or down verbal as to whether this letter of support gets sent.
I'm good, Scott.
Okay, got one. Shelley's a thumbs up. Austin is a thumbs up.
I was curious if we got an answer to Kristen's question about if they were actually talking about paving, like a bike trail type paving, or,
No, did not get an answer.
okay, well, you have three.
Okay. All right, then the last one, the last one I have is from Ms. Marcella Frankowski, Assistant Superintendent of Early Intervention Special Education, Maryland State Department of Education, requesting a letter of support for professional development opportunities to support a program to enhance educational opportunities in Washington County families that are operating under the IFSP or IEP programs. Using the Maryland SEFEO, have no idea what that means, pyramid model, looking for a letter of support to help get grant money for that program. Looking for thumbs up, or in the councilman's case, okay, I got 2 thumbs up. Got 3, got 4. All right, so we're good to go there. The last thing I have is, I forgot to mention in the first round, because this is late breaking, we are continuing to work on a virtual Imagine Hagerstown event that will happen in early June. I'm not going to give out too much information, but looking to do a kind of a pseudo virtual festival that will incorporate the values of our Imagine Hagerstown event, but do it on a virtual basis. And I will have more information on that coming forward. But just to let you know, we are continuing a commitment to Imagine Hagerstown, and we're going to do a virtual presentation that I hope some of you will recognize from our get-togethers on Friday and Saturday night. Hopefully we can get the details worked out. That's all for me, Mayor.
Kristen, you on? Kristen? All right, Lou?
Nothing for me tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Emily?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a statement. I kind of sound like a broken record because I know I've talked about this before while we've been shut in, but this week our community suffered a tremendous loss with a very good friend of mine and someone who was actively involved in the recovery community. And because of that, there's been a lot of people reaching out, struggling, and being very open about the struggles they're having with mental health and addiction during this time. So we're very focused on the COVID-19 pandemic, but we also are still suffering from the other epidemic that is still happening all across our country. So there are resources available. I think even the people that don't normally struggle with mental health are right now being kind of shut in away from people. So just know that there are resources available. The health department is operating from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. every day. And if you need help please reach out, because we're all feeling the loss of what happened this week, and we're all in this together. So that's it.
Austin.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out an idea that maybe we could start considering as we try to start reopening, and the businesses that have been so badly hurt, the restaurants downtown, they're going to be facing limited seating capacity, that type of thing, as they try to reopen and try to distance patrons at tables and that type of thing. And I was wondering if we can look at any way that we could help them by allowing additional outside seating, so that they can, out on the sidewalks, they can start putting tables out there, assuming the weather is nice and it's warming up a little bit now, just to be able to adhere to all the guidelines and try to get back to some kind of business revenue that might make it possible for them to survive and make it through to the other end of this thing.
Councilman, stay tuned.
Okay. That's all I have.
That's a great suggestion, by the way.
All right, Shelley, last but not least.
I just want to give a quick shout out to 2 city staff members that really helped at the last minute, Brenda Hallbaker and Eric Klein, helping to put up the banners for the high school students. I came to them at the last second, and even though Eric said, I don't know, Shelley, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, they were up in just a couple hours. So it was great teamwork and just a tremendous effort on city staff, which is not unusual. So thank you very much. And that's it.
I'm on the edge of my seat wanting to hear why our city administrator has asked Austin just to stay tuned.
Can't tell you. Have to kill you. No, I'm kidding you. No, it's a good suggestion.
It is a good suggestion, and one that I hope gets down the road to Annapolis where it belongs, because 7 miles away from here is a restaurant that's open that allows inside and outside seating, and you can go to the bar, you can do all those things, but we can't do that here in our city. So as of currently right now, as has been in the past, the only thing restaurants are allowed to do is curbside pickup and go inside, get your food, and leave immediately. So we need to change that. And I believe, and I've been saying it, and I've been chastised for it by some of my own people. And the problem is that we can do it as safely as every place else. We are not like every place else. We are not the DC metro area. We are Western Maryland, where our numbers are either decreasing or stabilized and not increasing. And it is time to let our people go. We need to get back to work. These restaurants that aren't going to make it, these small businesses that aren't going to make it, I truly believe that even though there is not a timeline for this CARES money, we need to find a way to help some of these small businesses that aren't going to make it till June 1st. And we have quite a few. So we need to get moving on this, and we need to get this CARES money, and it needs to get distributed and put in the hands of the people who need it. I know, I see it. I hear it every day. I comfort people who are going through it, and it's just, we need to do something, and we're not doing anything, but we need to do it, and we can't continue to wait until it's too late. So I'm frustrated enough, and I know, Scott, you get to hear it all the time, and I'm sorry that you have to be the my sounding board, but you are. So
Well, let me, and I appreciate that, Mayor, and I'd rather you do that with me than with anybody else. But one thing I will tell you is that I believe a couple months ago, I committed to all of you from city management team, including myself, that we would do everything we could to position ourselves to the point where when we were able to reopen, because we have honestly been looking at what we needed to do to reopen for the last 2 months, knowing that this was not going to last forever. And it's not. And what we have done is everything we could to, one, position ourselves to when the moment go that we are told that this can happen, this can happen, this can happen, we have steps in place that we can expedite whatever we need to, whether that be inspections, whether that be the funding. Once we get that CARES funding, you've seen tonight that this CARES Act application is going to allow us to move as quickly as possible to get this money where it belongs. And also, the staff has been extremely open to innovative ideas, such as what Councilman Heffernan has said. I can tell you, we've already started to talk about how that might happen, how we would coordinate such a situation to get more seats out for folks to get beyond a 50% capacity, if that so happens. Because you're right, Mayor, West Virginia is there now, and we've got a lot of people going across the border, and we're losing that business. And I do hope that I know that we are going to be positioned to where we are going to be able to move as fast as government can move, and that's going to be faster than I hope people have ever seen it move. And so that commitment's still on the table. And as you said, I think we owe it to the city to be able to do that. So that's it.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, I know that I've talked to restaurant owners and other small businesses who say that, you know, they have a plan. They have a plan to reopen, and they've been planning and they've been adjusting their plan as each day goes by. So, you know, as soon as hopefully some pressure gets put on the right individuals that needs to get put on, we can move forward. So having said that, all those interested, we have a public hearing at 7 p.m. on the tax rates beginning July 1, fiscal year budget, and other things. So come back and join us at 7 o'clock.
Again, we'll be on this session, folks, not the other.
On this session. Thank you. Bye.